Hello, everyone, and welcome to the January Finance Management APQC webinar, where we will be focusing on where finance's focus is for 2022. I'd like to introduce our two speakers today. We've got Todd Unikel, who is APQC's Finance Management Principal Research Lead in Research Services, and he's also an advisor in our Advisory Services Department. And joining him today will be Perry Wiggins, APQC's CFO. Welcome, Todd and Perry.
Thank you. Glad you could join us today. And thanks for the opportunity to share highlights from our priority survey with you. The annual survey is conducted to explore finance focus areas, initiatives, and challenges that our members and other participants identified as they look ahead this year for 2022. There were 6 topics included in the survey. I was not personally at APQC when the survey began, but I do know that these topics were influenced based on activity, interest, and feedback from our members and our partners via voice of member calls, ask us inquiries, interviews, and many conversation topics throughout the year. The 6 topics definitely do not reflect all of the focus areas that are important to survey respondents this year. And we only scratched the surface of these areas, but we think it can be very helpful to see how companies will be prioritizing at least a very good chunk of their time this year as they focus on the finance function. Survey responses came in from 305 participants across 14 different industries and 4 regions, mostly US and Canada, but also Europe and Asia Pacific, and a little from Central and South America. Feel free, please, to post any questions that you have via the chat, as we mentioned, and if we don't get to your questions today, we will follow up in a timely manner. Moving to slide 5 quickly, we're going to cover the 6 priority areas in the order that you see here, beginning with finance process improvement and ending with transition to a remote or hybrid workplace. This is the order that we're going to go through the content. And now on slide 6, it shows how respondents prioritize these 6 focus areas as they look ahead to this year, with process improvement, data management, and cash flow management as the top 3 priorities for 2022. Are there any big surprises here? Maybe one that we'll touch on briefly in a moment, but not really. It is not difficult to rationalize finance process improvement at the top of this list, because for one thing, it is certainly part of our business culture to improve, even when, maybe especially when a company is already at the top of its game, so to speak. And it's also part of APQC's mission and model to help companies improve process management and productivity across a wide range of functions. So again, it's not a surprise to see process improvement at the top of the list. Regarding data management, I think it's also good to see data management towards the top. Data management is a big subject. It covers some very important disciplines like data strategy and architecture, data security and data warehousing, data quality and data governance, and much more. And data management is really important to get right. Because arguably data is the lifeblood of your business. And we all know that no one wants finance spending lots of time collecting and compiling and racking and stacking data, particularly when it's not uncommon to see some of finance's highest skilled and highest paid resources doing that work. Now, for the next 2 areas, cash flow and risk management, more than half, or about 60% of the respondents, as we'll see later, are focused on strategies to improve both cash flow and risk management programs, particularly as it relates to dealing with 2 areas that we asked about in the survey. And one is being responsive to a high-risk economy, and 2 is planning for a post-COVID business model, if you'll concede such a thing. So given the unusual times that COVID has charted or created for us, it was It's not surprising to see cash flow management and risk management in the number 3 and 4 positions on this chart. I would say the surprise that isn't exactly a surprise relates to the 5th area of talent management. And this is more of a personal observation that I've seen, particularly working with CFOs and finance leaders to help them define a new vision for finance, or when prioritizing improvement initiatives as finance seeks to drive change. And the observation is that talent management rises or tends to get manually elevated to the top of the list, sometimes for optical reasons, because intuitively we know that, and we hear it said often, that people and their skills are the most valuable asset of a company. So it does make sense to see talent management as a focus area for 2022. And we're going to be doing we're just kicking off a finance talent management project for the first quarter right now. But it is a little interesting to see optically, at least, it at the bottom, towards the bottom. Okay, so let's move on now and look at some of the supporting details, beginning with process improvement on slide 8. So I want to spend a moment on this slide with respect to process improvement, the first priority area. And you'll see about 90% of our members and respondents in 2022 will be focused on 4 somewhat interrelated areas reflected in the first 4 rows of the chart here. And I think we could loosely refer to these first 4 rows as core fundamentals. And they include companies getting their core finance processes automated, using their core ERP system, and getting their end-to-end processes documented and set up in such a way that they're able to measure the efficiency and effectiveness of those processes. So it's not uncommon to see companies, our members, and the professional services firms that we partner with continuing to prioritize these fundamental areas ahead of other areas. Areas like AI and RPA that appear at the bottom of this chart. One reason for this is because streamlining business processes typically comes first and before automation from a best practice perspective. And 2, getting the ERP right and getting it configured and implemented with all of the basic ERP functionality, including all the core automation that's commonly included in your core ERP, that typically comes first, again, before RPA, for example, which many companies are using to further fine-tune and eliminate the still manual and repetitive tasks that require human intervention. Now, quickly, finance business partnering is sort of sitting there in the middle by itself. And this is another big and important focus area for finance. Many finance organizations want to be seen as a valued partner, working closely with operations managers as they focus on strategic topics and business issues and creating value for the broader organization. But generally speaking, that role of business partner starts getting more traction, more attention, and more priority after finance gets its core transaction processing and ERP functionality in place. So again, it makes sense that organizations are telling us that they will be making process improvements in the area of business partnering after they're focusing on their core fundamental areas that you see in the first 4 rows of this chart. So we already started getting questions about the difference between traditional process automation at the top of the last slide and RPA, which is at the bottom. And it's come up a number of times recently, so I wanted to address it here and rather quickly. Traditional process automation on the left is more holistic in nature. It focuses on end-to-end processes and it includes workflow automation. And so the goal is that once a step in a complex or multi-step process is completed, the software automatically moves on to the next step. And traditionally, that requires integrations and APIs and database access for information to be exchanged across multiple applications. On the other hand, RPA software is designed to mimic the way that humans perform repetitive and simple tasks. So RPA has to still push and plot its way through a manual process in the same way, that we do. And more work is often needed to combine multiple tasks together into a process with RPA. And I like how this Forrester analyst summarizes the rule of 5. I'm referring to the right side, second to last bullet, because the rule of 5 with RPA is that it tends to break if it has to make more than about 5 decisions or touch more than about 5 applications. So in short, while these two have similar names on the surface, they are different technologies, and RPA can be integrated into traditional process automation software like ERP and CRM tools to fill in the spaces for those manual, repetitive tasks. We're going to move to data management and slide 11 on the left. This slide shows that 75% of our members and respondents are currently leveraging finance data analytics, and more than 90% of them are using it to provide an accurate view of their key performance indicators. It is somewhat curious what the other 25% may be doing if they're not leveraging data analytics to inform decision making. But I suspect what this generally means is that members of the finance team are more or less generating standard performance reports and sending them or making them available to decision makers via self-service. On slide 12, we also asked about data visualization. And I know this slide requires a bit of reading, so we will get you a copy after the meeting. But for now, starting on the left, a majority of respondents are focusing on data visualization in 2022 because they want access to real-time data and they want visual financial forecasts and reports to make better business decisions and improve storytelling. On the right side, we see that about 57% of respondents are using Excel and/or visualization tools and dashboards that must be updated manually. That said, there are pockets of respondents that are using advanced visualization tools to really explore the relationships between data. 19%, in fact, are combining visualization tools with the use of a graphic artist. And companies are doing that. They're incorporating graphic artists after they've finished interacting with the data and exploring the data. And once they're ready to enhance the communications and make things prettier and more attractive, or add that wow factor to convey a message versus just displaying information.
So Todd, if I could add a little bit of insight coming from the perspective of a CFO. And first of all, thank you everyone again to you for being here on this webinar. Good morning or good afternoon to you, wherever you are. I see that we have people from all over the world join us today. So thank you. It means a lot for us, for you to be here participating in this. And just a little bit of background about me. I've been with APQC for now 4 years. And before that, I was in an executive, finance executive in healthcare for over 10 years and worked at Deloitte in the Cincinnati office for a number of years before I went into healthcare. So when I speak in first person today, I may have some anecdotes about my experience here at APQC, but also from the healthcare executive experience. But looking at these last two slides with data visualization and finance analytics, I know everyone on this call is using some sort of finance analytics to some extent, and also even data visualization, even if it's just basic charting in Excel. My experience informs me, and my recommendation to my peers on this call is to always know your audience. From my experience, I've seen that operations people seem to like greater use of data visualization. We've improved some of our systems here where we can do some of the interactive charting and graphing that changes in real time, and operations people like that a lot. If I do a presentation that's rich in graphs or online presentation that you can that's interactive content related, operations people like that, but if I try to do something that's rich in graphs and charting and interactive content for my CEO or board, I may be wasting a lot of time with my CEO and my board. They just want to know the results. They want to just hear the story, find out what went right, what went wrong. They may look at me crossways if I present them a lot of different visualization tools, just because that audience is a different audience than my operations managers here at APQC and in the past at healthcare institutions. They want to get to the point. So when you are coming up with how you tell your story, your finance story, either the results of a period that has ended, or if you're telling the story of a forecast or pro formas, make sure that you are aware of what your audience wants and needs and how they'll respond to the presentation of your data. Thanks, Todd.
Yeah, great points. Thanks for sharing that, Perry. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about cash flow management in the number 3 spot. The survey didn't go into a lot of detail about cash flow management, but we know that positive cash flow means that you can successfully run your business, while negative cash flow generally means all sorts of bad news. And we also know the pressure that COVID and this high-risk economy has put on nearly all businesses. And I think this slide tells us that our members and respondents are going to continue focusing on ways to increase positive cash flow in 2022. And I think they're going to do that, at least from this perspective, in the top row, number 1, by reevaluating budgets and forecasts and operating expenses. And that really means working on cutting out unnecessary expenses and streamlining and improving business processes, like we just talked about in the last section, and probably also increasing the prices and products of products and services, which I bet we're all seeing a lot of. And number 2, in the second row, respondents will also be looking at how COVID has impacted their business model. And to a large degree, that means brainstorming ideas to bring in new revenue streams, to add new products or services, to create new marketing strategies, and to bring in more customers, and then to encourage those customers to buy more. And then number 3, in the third row on slide 14, members and respondents, they're going to be focusing on accounts receivable and other revenue cycle and working capital innovations and improvements. And typically those will include things like getting customers to pay invoices on time, sending invoices out electronically and sending them out right away, and maybe following up very promptly with invoice reminders, using a bank lockbox to centrally collect remittances and automatically post cash, and much more. On slide 15, I thought that I would share that we are currently writing a monthly article for CFO Magazine. And February's edition is going to focus on cash flow management. We're going to spotlight a related benchmark metric, and we're going to talk about leading practices to improve cash flow and revenue cycle performance. So you might look out for that article because I'm not going to review all the detail here in this small font chart, but it is to come. And I touched on some of these practices that organizations are going to be focused on in 2022 as it relates to the revenue cycle, including order entry, order management, credit, billing, accounts receivable, collections. And so look for that to come.
Todd, if I could add a couple comments here.
Sure.
One of the things that we saw from our members here at APQC and for ourselves here as an organization was the importance and the significance and reminder of the significance that cash is king. That lesson was taught to us in 2020 due to the economic shutdown that the global pandemic caused. I think for many organizations here in the States and across the globe, we had kind of gotten away from that. How critical having cash reserves, strong cash reserves, having good end-to-end processes with cash collections is for a company. And I just want to drive home that point for all of us finance professionals here on this call, that within our organization, that we must be the voice for the organization to do prudent things when it comes to cash inflows and outflows. We have now learned through the hard way that external factors can have a significant impact on our business. We didn't foresee a global pandemic. We won't know if there'll be a pandemic 2 or pandemic 3 down the road. We don't know if there will be instability in the world that may affect our economics of our organization, the economics of our country's central banks. So it's prudent upon us, it's incumbent upon us to make sure we're pushing our leaders, our board, our CEOs, our operations managers to think about the decisions that we make, whether investing, whether it be operational expenses on the daily, how that affect us from a cash reserve standpoint in the short term, intermediate term, and also the long term.
Great, thank you, Perry. That's a pretty strong lead into the topic of risk management. And as I move to slide 17, finance is clearly focused on risk management. And in the chart on the right here, you'll see that 80% of members and survey respondents reported that they are either piloting, rolling out, or will fully implement a risk management program in 2022. And the top 3 risks in terms of coverage from a risk management perspective in a risk management program were operational, cyber, and credit risk. Similarly, with respect to importance, meaning which risks are most important to our members and survey participants, on slide 18, you'll see that market risk, cyber, and operational risk they take the top 3 spots. Given the COVID climate and the unprecedented uncertainties surrounding it, companies are clearly concerned about managing market risk, including changes to equity and commodity prices, which have been historical on the commodity side, as well as interest rate and foreign exchange fluctuations. And I think it's also interesting the fact that market risk is number 1 over cyber, I think is really saying something, particularly when you look at the cyber data. On the left side of 19, data from Cybersecurity Ventures, the world's leading researcher that covers global cyber, say that cybercrime will continue to grow 15% year over year to a whopping $10.5 trillion by 2025, and that cybercrime will represent the greatest transfer of economic wealth in history. And so that definitely caught my attention, that market risk, due to COVID, took the number 1 spot over cyber. On the right side, I just wanted to point out that in one of APQC's 2020 finance webinars, Donnie Shimamoto, the founder of Enterprise Technologies, provided an overview of the causes and the costs of cyber attacks. And he included a 7-step information privacy risk assessment that companies can complete in their cybersecurity efforts. There is a link at the top in blue there when we send the deck out if you're interested in cybersecurity. And I don't know if any of you are maybe watching Mr. Robot on Prime, but it's a show about a genius hacker and cybersecurity. Not a bad show. You might check it out if you're interested in that as well. So I'm going to move to talent management and go to slide 21. And In 2022, our members and respondents are going to be focused on where you would expect them to focus from a talent management perspective. And that is on developing and upskilling their current finance employees, on retaining their current finance employees, and then on acquiring new talent wherever they have specific needs and specific gaps. In terms of finance skills, the skill areas that we see on slide 22, they fall right in line, I think, with the process improvement focus areas that we reviewed up front in priority number 1 in the survey. And that is process management. They include process management and technology and automation, as well as data analytics and data literacy, and business partnering and collaboration. So again, it aligns well, and it looks like a solid short list of skills. You might also notice the skill preferences are very consistent as it relates to what companies want from both new finance employees on the left side and current employees on the right side. Again, we just kicked off a new research project for this quarter to do a deeper dive into finance talent management. And we are excited about that, and we hope that you'll stay tuned for that. Moving to the...
So Todd, can I jump
Sure.
in there real quick? I'm sorry, I was on mute.
No
I
problem.
apologize to everyone. One of the things that concerns me in this role, sitting in the office of CFO, is that right now there's a tight labor market here in the States. And I would be very concerned if one of my employees between our finance and accounting teams and our IT teams were to resign right now. Positions that we have open throughout the organization are taking longer to fill. So what I've learned being here at APQC that has helped mitigate some of that risk for us is, and I'm happy to see that on the earlier slide, one of the first priorities or the top priority is finance process improvement. And that's an area for everyone on this call. If you aren't, if your organization hasn't really committed to improving the finance processes, this is a good time to do so, particularly with a tight labor market and the risk of open positions staying vacant longer than typical. Hopefully your finance process improvement also includes finance documentation improvement there, as well as looking for ways to automate certain processes so that should you be short-staffed, right now between COVID and people resigning, the risk that you are short-staffed at some point is a valid and true risk. You know, do you have the processes documented in place that the people who are still within the organization can maintain and keep finance operations running smoothly? Do you have certain processes in place that allow for automation that do not require much human intervention? Those are the things that over the last few years here at APQC, we have done a lot internally to beef up our process documentation. One of the things we did 2 years ago is we went to a cloud-based ERP system. We went to NetSuite or Oracle NetSuite system versus a in-house system, which has been a significant improvement for us. So as you go about making sure that you are strengthening your finance teams and the talent within your teams, be mindful of that in your process improvement journey. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you, Barry. All right, so last and, well, maybe least in this case, on slide 24, our sixth priority area for 2022 is transition to remote workplace. And the data shows that 58% of respondents plan to make a permanent transition to a remote or hybrid workplace in 2022. And 22% in the top 2 rows there are back in the office full-time and have no plans to transition to a remote or hybrid workplace. And 21% are still working in the hybrid model, but they say that they don't know when or if they will go back to the office. So that's a bit interesting. For those that are making the transition to a remote or hybrid workplace, 71% see cost savings as the number one reason, while 64% indicate some concern for the work-life balance of their employees, which is nice. And 45% see the remote hybrid model as a productivity booster. I think given the success of remote work over the past year plus, it is likely that more and more companies will offer more and more work from home jobs in 2022 and the go forward. One practice that I've heard about recently that I think really shows a commitment to supporting employees from a work from home perspective is companies that are giving employees money to set up a home office. Some have given one-time payments for employees to buy office furniture or a computer monitor. Some are giving employees a monthly or a quarterly amount for recurring costs like internet or phone expenses. So we will have to see where that goes. And with that, I believe we have made it to the end of the slides for the webinar. I would like to thank you for your interest and patience and attendance. And I will throw it back over to Megan now, who will have a view into some of the questions that you may have asked along the way. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand it to you, Megan.
Thank you, Todd. We have our first question is to Perry about what data visualization tools are used as best practice.
Sure. Thanks, Megan. Well, everyone uses different tools, and there's, a million and one tools out there. Here at APQC, we do use Infogram. We also use some of the tools. I think I mentioned just a little bit ago that we updated and transform our internal ERP system to Oracle NetSuite. So there are some tools in the Oracle NetSuite system that we utilize, in addition to Infogram in some of our departments. Some of my peers use Tableau, which is pretty popular among some of my colleagues in other industries. You may use something different, but there are quite a bit out there. Tableau comes up a lot, even Google Charts, and of course, the charting and graphing in Excel, which is still tried and true. It's simple, but it still works. And again, for some audience that you go before, it would be just fine.
Thank you, Perry. Our next one is for Todd. Todd, you mentioned a finance talent management deeper dive research project. When will that be available?
The finance talent management project, so we're kicking that off in Q1 now. It will probably be the middle of 2022. Probably by the end of the summer, we'll be able to publish the results for the finance talent management deeper dive that we're kicking off now. Yeah.
Thank you. And earlier in the presentation, you talked about process automation compared to RPA. AI was also listed as a process improvement area. How is artificial intelligence different? And do you know some of the companies that provide those kinds of tools and technologies?
AI is different. It gets a little technical quickly, I think, because AI uses unstructured data. It uses free-form text and speech recognition. And AI is capable of developing its own logic and learning from mistakes and correcting errors in ways that I don't code and don't know exactly how it does that. But that compares to RPA is different, because RPA is, like I mentioned earlier, sort of automating simple tasks and pushing and plotting through the way that a human still does a manual process. RPA doesn't learn like AI does, and it's always using structured data. So, those the message bots and those chat bots that are utilized for customer service, that's using AI, and speech recognition tools. Those kinds of tools are using AI. It's different from RPA. The other thing that AI does well is it's able to review very large quantities of data, and then with the code and algorithms, it's able to find trends and make predictions that RPA doesn't do. I think you asked about some of the tools. There are some of the tools that combine AI and RPA together are in your large ERP systems like Oracle and SAP, and then some of the non ERP tools that support AI and RPA are Appian and Automation Anywhere, and another company called UiPath I've intersected with a little bit. I think there's one called Blue Prism. So some of those companies and tools support AI and RPA.
What are the key things to consider when documenting business processes?
Documenting business, I can take that one too. Documenting business processes. I think one thing that helps a lot is to make sure that you're really defining your scope first, right? Is this one process or several processes? Is it end to end? Where does the process start and where would it end when you're documenting business processes? I think scope is really important. I think it's also useful thinking about APQC and other areas where I've documented processes or done benchmarking. It's really useful to have a PCF, a process classification framework, or a taxonomy that defines all the activities that you would have in your process. All those activities should be documented, and it should be like a comprehensive view of what's going on, and generally a MECE view, mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive, so that you don't have anything out of the process that you're leaving out, and you're not duplicating something in your process that you have in one place and then you duplicate it and have it in another. So I think those are some important areas when documenting process. And then I think about swim lanes. So generally you're documenting the steps of your process in a flow. And then in a swim lane concept, you're also thinking about, who is responsible for each step. And then I think about the RACI concept as well. So not just who is responsible, but when you think about who's accountable and consulted and informed and responsible, if you're looking at process through that lens, you're probably going to have a good shot at documenting that process pretty well.
The next one, business partnering came up a couple of times. What does effective business partnering look like at best practice companies?
Yeah,
So I'll take that one. And I saw there's a question also from a Brian about how CFOs and finance organizations, how can they affect change outside of their own finance function? And the business partnering and collaboration aspect, I think that's one of the responses on one of the previous slides I was looking at here, requires trust. It's not something that happens immediately. You're not going to kick down anyone's door and say, hey, I'm the CFO or I'm the controller, and now include me in all your plans and to your change management. It's going to take time for people in operations throughout the organization to see your people and you as partners and getting them to be successful. One of the things that I've done wherever I'm at is let people know that I'm here to help them be successful. My team is here. We are, essentially support services. Operations is there to, get sales done, get contracts signed, deliver on those contracts. They are the revenue generators of the organization. Again, going back to my healthcare background, the people who generate the revenue were the physicians and the surgeons and the nurses. So finance team is there to support them, help them understand how doing certain things, dotting certain I's and T's with paperwork, documentation processes actually helps the organization from a financial standpoint and can help them in their particular areas and wings of the hospital. So for you, my advice, wherever organization you're in, is that to develop some type of strategy that starts today, that you start building rapport and trust up that may have been burned from previous relationships or previous meetings or previous events, but see how you build some of those bridges back up with your operations units and let them know how and show them how what you do in your area and how your employees can help them be better. And if they're better, we're all trying to make our own organizations better. And that's what's most important at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I might add a little context to that. That's a really good point. We've done a bit of work around operating model design, and that concept of business partner and being a valued partner. That role comes up a lot. Business partnering came up in this survey a couple times from a process improvement area, and also as one of the top skills. I think it was partnering and collaboration. And I think a business partner, they tend to sit in FP&A and have a dotted line to the business unit operations leaders. Not always, but I've seen that probably most often. And I think also a good business partner is certainly not just sending reports or doing what's good for finance, but they're also really focusing on helping that business partner, that business leader, improve their business. So they're not really just concerned about finance and finance's metrics, but the business's agenda and the business's metrics. And those qualities really help them earn that seat at the table when they get an opportunity to talk about business strategy and business issues and strategic topics, which the best business partners are wanting to be able to do. And so I think they have those really strong FP&A skills. I think they have strong analytical skills and business knowledge and collaboration, like you mentioned, Perry, and just good overall relationship and people skills, and they can think strategically. That's what I've seen anyway, is in terms of designing around strong business partner role.
Okay, this next question is for Perry. Why might cost savings be at the top of the list for reasons to transition to a remote or hybrid workplace?
Will you repeat that, Megan? I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Why might cost savings be at the top of the list for reasons to transition to remote and hybrid workplace? I think even you and I were talking about that the other day, about why that was so high on the list.
Well, as finance people, some of us finance, some of us accounting, some of us a little bit of both there. You have to do your cost benefit analysis for your organization. It may not be worth the savings you get from a remote setting versus what you lose from being in person. Here at APQC, we do have a hybrid model that we've been following since October, November of 2020. So throughout this pandemic, we felt that collaboration, being in person in the building with masks on when the virus cases were up, was critical to our type of work that we do. We are primarily a research organization, a knowledge management organization, and being away from each other, just the loss of engagement that we were seeing the loss of collaboration that we experience, it was best for us to, at some points, to be in person. Now, if you are an organization that is a multi-million, multi-billion-dollar organization that has a large commercial real estate footprint, it may be worth it to you to consolidate on space. And commercial leases cost a significant amount of money, and all of us here know that for the money that we're signing checks for and paying out to our commercial landlords. So if your organization is in a position where doing a hybrid or remote work from home setup could help the organization come off some very burdensome and expensive commercial leases, that is a big factor into your decision making.
Thanks, Perry. Let's see, we've got a CFO question here. So do CFOs have the knowledge regarding the true cost of products and services gleaned from their management costing systems, given the lack of cost accuracy for many of today's managerial cost accounting systems?
That's a great question, Megan. I think that's more for, that'd be like a CFO roundtable to get an answer for. I think Brian asked that question here. That's a great question, Brian. I can't answer that here on this call. I think that's more like, I think a lot of CFOs and controllers after this, need to get to a roundtable or have drinks at a bar and talk about all the issues that come from some of our cost accounting systems. But that definitely can be a problematic issue for many of you on this call, on this webinar.
Okay, I'm scrolling through some of these questions here. Some of them I think we've already answered. Let's see. The tools. Rodrigo, I'd like, if you're still on, to maybe better clarify your question about using the use of data to get better business insights. I'd like to understand more about what you're asking. We have another one about how expensive AI is, and that's a high cost investment, and any idea how much it would take to pay back.
So Megan and Todd, I don't believe we here at APQC have that data here, or we can report on that. That does sound like a great research project here for APQC, so we can answer Bernardo's question there with some more clarity. So that is a wonderful question there for us to do some research on here at APQC.
Yeah, a lot of times, that's a great point. A lot of times, clients and members will engage in a vendor selection project where they'll define a set of requirements that are needed for their issue, their tool, and then we will be able to take them on the advisory services side, take them through an objective process of defining those requirements and bringing vendors in to demo a tool, and then cost is a big component of it. The TCO, total cost of ownership, tends to sometimes get a lot of weight up front and kind of moves all around. But yeah, what's the return on the total cost of ownership and the return on investment for it depends a little bit on how you're going to use the tool. So doing a vendor selection project like that will give you an opportunity to learn and stack 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 vendors next to each other and really do an objective fact-based comparison.
Thank you both. I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. If we happen to miss your question, we'll go back through and take a look at the Q&A and chat. And if we have missed you, we will be sure to respond to you in the next few business days. And a couple of reminders before I let everyone go, that you will receive a copy of the slides and the recording from today's webinar within 2 business days. And please make sure to take our webinar satisfaction survey when you exit our webinar. and visit apqc.org/events to learn more about upcoming webinars and events. And then there's also a way that you can watch some on-demand webinars that we have available as well. So thank you everyone for joining us today and kicking off 2022 in the finance webinar series. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.